What happens when punishment becomes not just justice, but a performance for the gods, the emperor, and the crowd? Imagine a dusty courtyard in Imperial China. The sun is low and unforgiving, casting long shadows across cracked stone. Officials in crimson robes stand like statues, their silence heavy with expectation. At the center of the courtyard, a man is dragged forward, his arms bound behind him, his legs trembling. His face is gaunt, not with fear alone, but with the weight of what's to come. The crowd has gathered. Peasants, merchants, elders, all silent, all waiting. There are no cries for mercy, only the rustle of silk as an executioner steps forward, blade in hand. The first cut is small, just the shoulder. The second across the chest. A third along the thigh. And so it begins. This is not a scene of chaos. It is not done in haste or secrecy. It is precise, measured, ritualized. In Imperial China, torture was more than cruelty, it was symbolism. Each act was deliberate, designed to restore balance, enforce cosmic order, and project unshakable authority. Punishment wasn't hidden in prison walls. It stood on full display, elevated on platforms, beneath the watching eye of the emperor's law. This was not just about breaking the body. It was about destroying the soul. Over the next moments, we'll descend into a world of slow slicing, spiritual annihilation, and public shame so profound that even death offered no escape. These punishments were not meant to be forgotten. They were meant to echo across generations. To grasp the brutality of ancient Chinese torture, we must first understand the philosophy that wrapped cruelty in ritual and called it balance. Imperial China was built upon two powerful systems, Confucianism and Legalism. One offered moral guidance, the other demanded absolute order. Confucianism taught harmony, filial piety, and social hierarchy. Everyone had a place: emperor, scholar, peasant, woman, and virtue meant staying within it. But legalism, which often worked hand in glove with Confucian ideals, took a darker view. Humans were inherently selfish, and only strict laws and harsh punishments could maintain peace. Together, these beliefs gave rise to a chilling contradiction. Mercy was weakness, and justice meant fear. The emperor, known as the Son of Heaven, ruled by divine mandate. His laws were not merely legal, they were sacred. Disobedience was not only treason, it was cosmic disarray. And to restore that order, the offender had to suffer, not just in body but in spirit. Torture wasn't an exception to the legal system, it was part of the process. Confession was essential in Chinese law. Without it, punishment could not be properly administered. But confessions weren't always volunteered, they were extracted through pain, and these methods were not hidden. On the contrary, they were public, ceremonial, and deeply theatrical. Executions were scheduled events. Crowds were encouraged to watch. The accused might be paraded through town wearing wooden collars or kneeling for hours under the blistering sun, surrounded by signs that listed their crimes. Why such spectacle? Because punishment served not only the law, it served society. The pain of one was meant to educate thousands. It reinforced the idea that order was sacred and defiance would bring divine consequence. Legal texts like the Tang Code and the later Qing legal code didn't just allow torture, they detailed it. Degrees of pain were matched with social rank and severity of crime. The body became a canvas on which the state painted its warning. It was not just about punishing evil. It was about preserving the order of heaven and earth. But what kind of civilization constructs its law around agony and calls it justice? If there was ever a punishment designed to erase a person, not just from life, but from legacy, it was Lingchi. Known in the West as death by 1,000 cuts, Lingchi was the most feared execution in Imperial China. It was not merely a method of death, it was a spiritual obliteration. A sentence so horrifying, it was reserved only for the most condemned, parricides, traitors, and those who threatened the very roots of the empire. The ritual began not with a blade, but with silence. The condemned was bound to a wooden frame in the open air, exposed to wind, sun, and the eyes of the people. There were no hoods, no blindfolds, no last words. Instead, there was a crowd watching. Some wept, most simply stared. Then came the knife. The executioner, trained not only in precision but in rhythm, would begin with small slices, a sliver of flesh from the upper chest, another from the shoulder, a third from the thigh. Blood seeped slowly. Pain was excruciating, but death did not come quickly. The goal was not to kill, not yet. It was to reduce, to peel away humanity piece by piece. In many cases, hundreds of cuts were inflicted over hours. A hand, a cheek, the genitals. The executioner followed an order that combined legal doctrine with theatrical timing. The final stroke, a mercy, was usually a swift decapitation, but even that could be denied. In some instances, especially under the Ming dynasty, the condemned was allowed to linger until they either died from shock or madness. One of the most famous cases occurred in 1905, during the waning years of the Qing dynasty. A man named Fu Xiang, convicted of murdering a high-ranking official, was sentenced to Lingchi. His execution was not only recorded, it was photographed. The images smuggled out by Westerners shocked the world. In them, Fu Xiang appears wide-eyed, still conscious, his chest and limbs carved like butcher's meat. But Lingchi was more than cruelty, it was symbolism. In Chinese spiritual belief, the body must remain whole to pass into the afterlife. To die dismembered was to lose the soul's chance at peace. Reincarnation would be impossible. The person would drift in torment, unanchored forever. In this way, Lingchi was a double death, of the body and of the soul. And for the empire, it served a clear purpose. To see such suffering was to fear disobedience. To witness such agony was to bind the crowd, not just in fear, but in complicity. No one left such an execution unchanged. Message was eternal: betray the emperor and you will be undone. But while Lingchi ended in blood, some punishments left the body intact and shattered the spirit instead. Not all punishments in ancient China spilled blood. Some were quieter, slower, infinitely more enduring. The cangue, a large, heavy wooden collar locked around a person's neck, was one of the most humiliating tools of punishment ever devised. It didn't tear the flesh, it didn't draw blood, but it crushed the soul with public disgrace. The device itself was simple: two thick wooden boards fastened together with iron hinges, leaving a hole for the head. Some weighed 20 kilograms, others over 30. Once locked in, the condemned could neither lie down nor rest their neck. Eating, sleeping, even wiping tears became impossible. And this punishment didn't happen in isolation. It happened in public. The condemned was led through marketplaces, temples, and town centers. Hanging from the front of the cangue was a placard listing their crime in bold ink: thief, adulterer, unfilial son. Some were tied to posts. Others were forced to stand until their legs gave out and they collapsed in the dirt. There was no escape from the crowd's gaze. Passers-by were encouraged to mock, spit, or throw refuse. Children laughed. Merchants jeered. Even relatives were expected to show shame, not pity. In Confucian society, where honor and social face defined one's place in the world, this was worse than death. The cangue didn't just restrict the body, it exposed the soul. To be seen in it was to become an object of scorn, a living warning to others. Some victims endured for days. Infections set in, muscles spasmed, neck vertebrae compressed under the weight. Many eventually died not from the collar itself, but from exhaustion, dehydration, or despair. And for those who survived, the psychological wounds remained long after the collar was removed. Wearing the cangue was not just about punishment. It was about transformation, turning a person into a symbol. A breathing, suffering effigy of what happens when you disobey. It told the world, this is what disgrace looks like, but even shame had limits. There were some crimes the empire believed could not be addressed by humiliation alone. For those, pain returned to the courtroom and iron to the skin. In Imperial China, confession was not a privilege, it was an obligation. Without it, justice could not be complete, and if the accused did not confess willingly, the state would extract the truth one scream at a time. Torture wasn't hidden in dark corners, it was embedded in law, prescribed in legal texts, overseen by magistrates. Pain was a sanctioned part of the process. Among the most feared instruments was the iron chair, a cruel throne designed to turn the human body into fuel. The accused, often stripped naked, would be bound tightly to a heavy metal frame embedded with spikes. Beneath the seat, hot coals were placed, heating the chair slowly, flesh blistered and seared. The spikes pressed deeper with each shift of the victim's weight. Some screamed. Others passed out from the pain, only to be revived and interrogated again. Then there was the stretching rack. The victim was tied at the wrists and ankles, limbs pulled in opposite directions by a twisting wheel or rotating bars. With each turn, muscles tore, joints dislocated, bones cracked under pressure. The sound of tendons snapping was as much a part of the trial as the magistrate's voice. Some accused never made it to trial. Their joints were shattered long before any verdict was reached. But not all torture required large devices. Some of the most excruciating methods were small, silent, and precise. Bamboo splinters were slid under fingernails, Thin, sharpened, and dry, they pierced soft tissue with unbearable agony. Sometimes they were lit on fire, forcing the victim to choose between flame and pressure. Finger crushers, wooden wedges inserted between fingers, were tightened slowly until the bones broke one by one. Some were designed to crush the ankles or knees, depending on how resistant the accused was. These tortures weren't random. They were ritualized. A court clerk recorded each cry, each confession, each fracture. Torture was calibrated, too little, and the accused might resist, too much, and the confession might be considered invalid. And all of it was done in view of witnesses, family members, community elders, scribes. Even those who weren't tortured directly were expected to observe. The message was clear: pain is the price of truth, and the psychological terror extended beyond the individual. If your neighbor was accused, you watched. If your brother screamed, you listened. Torture wasn't only about extracting information, it was about spreading fear like ink through water. But some punishments didn't end in the courtroom or the square. Some followed the condemned beyond the grave, denying them even the peace of death. In Imperial China, punishment did not end with death. For the gravest crimes, treason, heresy, rebellion, the corpse itself became a battleground. Even in death, a person could be judged, humiliated, and destroyed. At the heart of this horror was a profound spiritual belief. The body was sacred, even in death. In Chinese cosmology, especially under Confucian and Taoist influence, the body given at birth was to be returned whole. To mutilate it, even in the grave, was to sever the soul's connection to eternity. And so, to punish a corpse was to annihilate that soul completely. In some cases, officials would exhume the remains of a disgraced traitor. The skeleton would be dragged from its grave and beheaded, the skull mounted publicly as if the dead could still serve as a warning. In others, the body would be burned, ensuring no proper burial, no ancestral offerings, no spiritual peace. This wasn't just cruelty. It was cosmic punishment. In a society where ancestral rites were essential for family honor and future blessings, to be denied a grave was to be erased from both history and the afterlife. Then came the most devastating punishment of all, Zhu Lian Jiu Zu, the execution of 9 generations. This punishment, carried out in extreme cases of betrayal against the emperor, did not stop with the guilty. Parents, children, grandchildren, cousins, even servants, all were executed or enslaved. The goal was total obliteration, a warning so vast it reached across bloodlines and erased legacies. In some instances, names were struck from family records, ancestral tablets smashed, and tombs desecrated. It was not enough to end a life. The empire demanded that the memory of that life be shattered, scattered across the earth. Symbolically, it was the ultimate death, the destruction not only of the individual, but of their lineage, their name, and their soul's place in the universe. It was a message to every subject. Defy the emperor and you will vanish, not just from this world, but from all worlds to come. And yet for the empire, all of this was necessary. Pain, even beyond death, was part of balance, a terror not just justified, but sacred. In the grand narrative of Imperial China, justice was not blind. It was ritualized, calculated, sacred. Each punishment we've explored, from Lingchi's 1,000 cuts to the shame of the Kang, from the heat of the iron chair to the desecration of the dead, was not merely violence for violence's sake. These acts were performances. They told a story where order trumped mercy, where the emperor's will echoed louder than compassion, where the pain of one could stabilize the fate of millions. But beneath the silk robes and ceremonial drums lay a darker truth. Justice was often terror in disguise. It controlled through shame. It commanded through agony. It reached not only the body, but the soul, the family, the very idea of self. And yet, for centuries, it was believed to be balance, a divine necessity. So we must ask, was this justice, or was it control, ritualized, sanctified, and endlessly repeated? And as we look at our modern systems, our prisons, our laws, our silences, are we truly free of such thinking, or have we simply changed the instruments?